I focused, I guess, the question tonight on distinguishing suffering. I feel silly describing types of suffering, but I certainly can feel when I feel in pain, when I feel I'm suffering, and trying to work through that have perhaps developed a tendency to just try to say yes. Though I may not understand what is behind the suffering, trying to find what's behind the suffering, to be able to maybe say yes to whatever's blocking that. When I formed the question and called in, I was feeling as though I was seeing two kinds of suffering. That which I create through my story, and that which is, dare I say, naturally occurring.
That's okay. Sure.
And it seems that which is naturally occurring is easier for me to say yes to.
Yes, because it's more a natural dynamic of life. Yeah,
that which perhaps is coming through my story, I have more trouble with, where I then almost shotgun a yes at almost everything blindly and don't even know what tethers I've cut in the midst of the suffering. I don't know that I can distinguish. And I guess I was just looking to see what you could.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, because there are different types and different qualities of suffering. As you say, there's a kind of suffering that's, we could even use the word natural. You know, you have someone that's very beloved to you and very dear to you, and they die, they pass away, and you naturally probably are going to experience some grief when something like that happens, right? And that's a relatively natural thing to experience. That, however, can turn into a different kind of suffering, or you can experience something in your life that was very difficult, very trying, say, to go through, or you had some sort of inequity, happen to you, and there was some sort of suffering. It was very difficult for you to go through it. That's part of life. There's times in life that are just that are challenging to get through. That's a kind of that can trigger a quality of suffering, but that kind of suffering is relatively. It's not that it's just comes and goes like a flash of lightning, but it's relatively momentary. The kind of suffering that people tend to live in is a kind of suffering that we're actually maintaining. We're maintaining and recreating it through our narrative about it.
I'm no good.
I'm no good. They're no good. We're no good. That shouldn't have happened. So-and-so was awful. Just all the ways we talk to ourselves about an event that may at the moment have been very difficult. You may have experienced some deep suffering from it. But the question becomes, now, since the events of our life actually come and go relatively quickly, not always, but often, how is it that I'm maintaining something, a state of suffering, where the objective circumstances of it are no longer occurring?
Long past.
Yeah, they're long past. So, which is actually, one could hear this in a way that would be judgmental, which would be unfortunate, like, oh, I'm maintaining my own suffering, I must be really terrible. Or one could hear it as, if a lot of my psychological suffering is something that I myself am maintaining, even though I may not be doing it consciously, but if that's what's maintaining it, that's actually extraordinarily good news. Because if the cause of our psychological suffering, the kind of suffering that continues with us week to week, month to month, year to year, was actually in the hands of an event or in somebody else's hands, if somebody else was ultimately to blame, then we would be trapped. There would be no way out. But since we ourselves conditionally, automatically maintain much of the suffering that we go through, that actually means if I'm maintaining it, then some way or another, I can ultimately stop that. In other words, I actually have the keys to my own well-being, my own freedom in my own hands. They're not in somebody else's pocket from the past or from yesterday or from any other time in life. They're in my pocket. And as you said, that kind of suffering can actually be more insidious, can it? More difficult. Because it encompasses, especially if it's lasted for a long time, it becomes part of our worldview. It becomes part of us. And to relinquish it can feel like one part of us really wants to relinquish it, but another part feels as though we'd be letting go of something that's become very, very familiar. Might even be experienced as almost essential. Do you get what I'm saying?
I understand that. I do get that.
Okay, so now I'm sure you're going to have another part of this. Yeah.
I'm reflecting on my dream last night, and the dream had to do with having an excitement through my whole body, that there was a clarity. There was a clarity about life.
Yeah.
And through that clarity, there was this lightness and an expansiveness that embraced.
Yeah.
Everything that was happening in the dream, and it was with a certain delight, and there was maybe even a touch of awareness in the moment of the dream to think that clarity represented falling away of some of the shackles that I've been trying to get into.
Well, the dream was definitely, to use Rilke's words, even though it was a dream, because in our dreams we can also have, that the great strength of the darkness of eternity is breaking into my body. The great strength of eternity was breaking into your dream last night, bringing with it that great clarity, which always makes you feel very light, buoyant, vital.
But then the degree, maybe slight, of suffering as the morning or day progressed was in feeling that nothing had changed.
Yeah.
And there is no life circumstance.
Funny, isn't it?
That I could, I could talk about the job, but ultimately, life is good. It's just that I feel I've tasted such clarity many times.
Yeah.
And there's some anchor on a leg here.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking that I just have to, because you introduced an idea with the last class, to me at least. And I guess it's through the poem as well tonight, to go ahead and walk in the darkness, to go ahead and say yes, suffering.
That too.
Embrace the pain or the evil and see the gift that it beholds. So conceptually, I can go there, but I don't know. I question at times if the being in me is as free as philosophy.
I would also wonder, let it percolate in you. Wonder a little bit of what would it mean for you, particularly for you. What would it mean for you to, in some way, to tend to that clarity? What would that mean to tend to it, to remain faithful to it? Obviously,
To nurture it.
Yeah,
like
to
a flower
nurture
in the
it.
garden.
There you go. Right. You can't reach out and grasp it. That's a good way to strangle it. But yeah, to nurture it, to tend it. What would that... And, there's not a specific thing. There's not sort of one way. But I think sort of really feeling in for you, what would it mean for you to tend it? To have something that would allow it a little space to be.
I like that.
Yeah. And I think, often, we go back to the old prescribed methods of spirituality to try to get our answers to that question. But I think also that it's very powerful to realize that we also each live our own very unique lives. And it's a really good idea to begin to ask ourselves these questions in a way that the answers are going to come from us rather than something else, rather than somewhere else. That we start to contact with our own intuitions about what would it mean to sort of to tend to whatever revelation, great or small, in the waking hours or in a dream. What would it mean to today to tend to it just a bit, to give it, our two most prized commodities, as I call them, a little of our time and a little of our attention. I think that's a way to keep them alive, to keep the avenue of grace open, to keep it open. All right, my friend. Nice to talk with you, Mark. Okay. Yeah. Bye-bye.